Hey, this is Stu with the Military Investor Network, and I am here with Walter. He has a company called BlueWaterREI, and he is an Army guy,
Sad but
but
true.
but his brother is in the Navy, so that I like him a little more already. But hey, Walter, thanks for being here, man.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity, Stuart. Doug and I, being both active duty, myself Army and him Navy, we truly embrace the joint nature of the force, and we're just excited to be able to talk about some real estate with you, and really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I bet the Army Navy game is pretty fun every year, right?
Keeps it interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good, man. So I brought you on, and I wanted to talk to you about kind of due diligence for a market. And you had written an article on LinkedIn not too long ago about you and Doug going down to El Paso, Texas, to look at that market. You are kind of looking at buying some multifamily property down there. Is that correct?
That is correct. For the past 5 or 6 years or so, Doug and I have focused on the single family houses and rental space, and we're making the leap to multifamily, looking to pick up some small apartments. So kind of the first step in that beyond basic education is really doing some market analysis and understanding the different indicators in a market that make it advantageous or not, frankly, for some kind of apartment investing. So we've come in on El Paso. We're excited, and we made our first trip down there a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and so neither of you are in El Paso. Is that true?
That is correct. We're running split-based ops. Doug is on the West Coast, just north of Seattle, and I'm actually out here in D.C., stationed at the Pentagon. I did have the opportunity to live in El Paso, though, from 2008 to 2011. Some of you might know there is an Army base down there. So I'm familiar with El Paso, and it's been 6 or 7 years since I've been back, but it was great to be back to the first real place that I was stationed. So.
Okay, and that's kind of important. I think a big part of choosing a market is having a knowledge of the area first and foremost, and probably a little bit having some type of network there to where you can kind of tap into. So I guess why El Paso? What was the first inclination that you chose El Paso?
So we really started a serious market analysis probably back in January, and it really took us 3 or 4 months to looking at all the possible cities in the United States. With all that opportunity, where do you really focus your energy and your efforts? Because I would offer that if you're trying to look everywhere, you're looking nowhere. So really that first part is to narrow down the market that you're interested in, or narrow it down to a handful, and then begin to dive deeper in there. So to answer your question, Stu, the couple things that excite us about El Paso are the household growth, population growth that we're seeing. It's expected to rise currently at about a 1.2 percentage rate through 2020. And then the flip side of that is really some economic growth. El Paso has been growing 2000 to 2010 about 2%, and projected about 1.5% for the next few years. So the key indicators that we look for in any market, and that we did find in El Paso, is household growth, not just population, but households. And then some economic growth in there. We like to avoid those areas of the country that people are leaving, obviously, and that in those areas of the country that are seeing either flat and or negative economic growth. That really is a recipe for disaster when it comes to a strong tenant base and investing in apartments.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
super. That's great. And again, so this isn't, we're not here to for our listeners, this isn't a plug on El Paso, and
No, definitely not.
it sounds great. What I really want to get across is, what numbers and what data, what metrics you're looking for, and what you're saying so far sounds fantastic. So where are you getting this information? Where are you finding this type of data?
So just to summarize it there, we really like to see a 1% on both of those metrics, the household growth and the economic growth. Tons of resources out there. You can start at great places are Berkadia, Marcus and Millichamp. These are both fairly well-known, large commercial market analysis type industries that produce quarterly and annual reports. They also provide some forecast data at the beginning of each year. So those are great places to start. There's a company called IRR as well, another multifamily apartment information out there for you. But perhaps most importantly that we used a lot was the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. It's a BLS.gov, so it's run by the federal government, and they provide statistics on employment, household, consumer price indices, all of this great information that you really need to be able to dig into the weeds. They specialize by region and by city, and all that information is publicly available and updated for investors free of charge, and it's reputable, and you know that since it's the federal government, there's absolutely no agenda there when they're trying to sway investors one way or the other. Another good resource is Housing and Urban Development. Again, another free website maintained by the government. A lot of housing statistics, renter statistics, etc. And then lastly, once you've kind of sifted through those, I would encourage your investors and those interested to actually go to the city websites. A lot of the cities have a economic development webpage where they will highlight their different indices, statistics, and economic indicators that they're using to lure business. So just know that those city websites are trying to get investors and business people to work in their city, but it can also be a great resource of information.
Okay. That's awesome. That's some great information. So you guys recently made a trip down to El Paso, right?
We did. About 3 weeks ago, we made a trip down there, and it's just real quick to back up. In addition to the market and household indicators that we look for, I think it's also important that investors look at the pro-business and landlord-tenant laws for where they're looking at. There are some areas of the country that, frankly, it's very hard to do business in, and the governments and the courts and the legal entity structure very much favor the tenants. And while I am always looking out for my tenants and want to be fair to them, in some areas of the country, those laws are so skewed that it makes it very difficult for a landlord and investor to be successful. So we look for pro-business areas as well. And then kind of lastly is that acquisition cost. Your big metropolitan areas, your New Yorks, your Seattles, your LA, to get into the multifamily space, price per unit is astronomical. So depending on where you're starting out and how much money you have, you look at the acquisition cost. And that's certainly what we did in El Paso. Part of our preparation was that education and that market analysis that we've talked about. In addition to those things, in order to prepare ourselves, I was very focused on networking. I networked via phone. Actually back in July, I was able to hop on the phone with you, although you're not in El Paso.
Yeah.
Part of that networking and adding value to one another, really, that's the name of the game. So networked via email, via phone, via LinkedIn. We have our website that our company website that you managed. If I give a little plug there,
Absolutely.
BlueWaterREI.com. And then through that LinkedIn social media platform, Facebook as well. And then kind of to round it out, I created what I call a credibility book, which is essentially nothing more than a business overview, an investment strategy and process of what we're looking to do, as well as an introduction of who we are as a company and individuals, and the process that we employ. So I was able to send that PDF document out to realtors, property managers, and potential small bank local lenders in the area to say, hey, I am an investor. I don't own an apartment yet, but hey, I actually know what I'm talking about. I've thought this through, and here's the process that I'm going to employ to be successful. Do you want to join my team? And then through that networking, I set up the specific appointments. It was a very quick trip. Flew in on a Friday morning and flew out Sunday at about noon.
Nice.
So really, that preparation, laying the groundwork, I think is what is really what enabled us to be successful.
Okay. And so when you guys went down there, did you kind of pivot around like a realtor? Did you like meet a realtor and the realtor kind of took you around and through that individual kind of introduced you to others, showed you different areas? Kind of how did the trip go just in general?
Yeah, we started out with a property manager actually,
Okay.
giving us the lay of the land. Something that is absolutely vital when you're remotely investing is to understand the submarkets of the market that you're in, and those local people, the property managers, the brokers, realtors, and the lenders, they understand that submarket and they can point you in the right direction, and they can provide the level of detail that you can't get from those big commercial type firms that I mentioned earlier. So we had an opportunity to talk nitty gritty details of the market, everything from rents in the submarkets to typical expense rates. And then after we met with the property manager, we did link up with a couple realtors, looked at a couple properties, and really got boots on the ground to understand the submarkets of El Paso and just how those.
That's awesome. So did you like what you saw? I mean, was it a successful trip? Are you going to continue to look there for investing?
Absolutely a successful trip. Quick but efficient, and we're really excited about what we saw. Our strategy is to invest in Class C apartments, small apartments, 5 to about 30 units. We're looking for a value add kind of play, so where we can add value to the asset in order to make it perform better, and thereby really keep a good tenant base and provide a stable, comfortable, affordable living for them. So we are absolutely encouraged. And some late breaking news: we submitted our first offer on a 28 unit down in El Paso, and we're excited to see where that goes.
Oh, nice, man. That's awesome. Congratulations.
So big first step. We'll wait to see if it's actually accepted, and if we can move to the further due diligence for the property itself. But we certainly are hopeful.
Very cool. That is great news. Well, good. So, any last kind of tips that you could think of as far as performing due diligence on a market?
I would encourage everyone that's looking to do their due diligence and market analysis. One, to use multiple resources. I'm an intel guy by trade, so the more sources you have that can corroborate one another, the better picture that you can paint for yourself of the market. We kind of hit on this when we talked about market specifics, but there's really no replacement for local knowledge. So you really got to talk to people that are in the market. You can't just rely on the reports that are published. So, and then finally, you got to spend the money. You got to buy a plane ticket, get a rental car and a hotel, and at some point, you've absolutely got to visit the market. So, I think if investors can do those three things, and then once again focus and hone in their research on one or two, because if you're everywhere, you're nowhere. I think those are really the recipes for success.
That's huge, man. Great information. So thank you so much. It's super informative. I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on with me and teaching our listeners about how to look at a market and do research. So you already mentioned your website. How can people get a hold of you if they have more questions besides just your website? You have email, phone. What's the best? How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So once again, website is www.BlueWaterREI.com. You can find me on LinkedIn under Walter Vogel. And then finally, email is probably the best method to get a hold of me outside of those two, and that's walter@BlueWaterREI.com.
Very cool. Well, thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. Great information. And guys, talk to Walter. He's got a wealth of information about not only about El Paso, but how to do research on a market. Congratulations on your offer. I wish you the best of luck, and I hope it comes through.
All right. Thanks. Appreciate the ability to speak with you.
Absolutely, man.